Thank you so much, and thank you everybody, both audience and speakers, for giving us a bit of time here in this lovely day late in July. We hope we have some great information and speaker insights to share. I'm confident that we do, in fact. So my name is Rick Ducey. I'm the Managing Director of BIA Advisory Services, and I am joined today with my co-host for these quarterly OTT updates we're doing with Mitch Oscar.
Hello.
Mitch, how are you doing today?
Hello, thank you, Rick.
Good to hear. You'll hear more from Mitch and our speakers as we get deeper into this webinar. So our plan today is going to offer first some BIA data and insights about OTT, over-the-top TV, and for the most part, from our viewpoint in terms of impressions and viewership, paid impressions and viewership, really we're talking about connected TV, but we'll get into that in a bit. But today, we have a great set of speakers you'll hear about shortly and then hear from in depth, talking about connected devices, what broadcast groups are doing, their OTT plays, getting into topics like measurement and attribution. And this all involves technology, media, content, audiences, buyers, sellers, and inevitably we're joined by technology. So the ad tech workflow and programmatic trading we'll get into. For BIA, I'm going to spend just a bit of time at the beginning here talking a little bit about the data that we have and some of the insights I'll share around OTT. So we do forecasting and we provide advisory services, CI, what we call competitive intelligence, strategy consulting. And then for each one of the 210 markets, we have OTT ad spending forecasts going out through 2025. Next slide, please. So just looking at our OTT coverage, as I mentioned, we do these OTT updates, Mitch and I do, with an awesome set of speakers each time on a quarterly basis. We also have podcasts, we have a newsletter, we have a blog, we have various reports. If you go to BIA.com, you can navigate around and see the different kinds of assets that we have around this topic of OTT. Our focus most often is on local media, so that's geo-targeted. So we kind of categorically exclude national buys unless it has a geo-targeted element to it. So it's local is what we live and breathe in our practice area. And we've been around for a while, since 1983. Next slide, please. So I gave our definition of local. It's all media generating revenue by selling access to local audiences to all type of advertisers. So just using auto as an example, like tier 1 auto, typically it's going to be a national level buy and it won't get into regional or individual markets. So using the auto example, we would focus on tier 2, tier 3 spending. There are times where tier 1 spending has a geo-targeting element and we try to match those exceptions. So OTT, I mentioned a lot of that. It really is coming to connected TV where the ad inventory is targeting a TV screen, a big TV screen. That's true for the most part, and that's basically what we try to focus on, since that's, again, where the impressions and the interest for advertisers through connect with audiences tends to be. Next slide, please. So if we look at our forecast, we can see that OTT is growing nicely. This year, we're saying that of all the OTT spending, $1.3 billion will be targeting local audiences. So you've seen other estimates, I'm sure, that put OTT spending at a much higher level than this. Basically, what we're getting in our research from speaking with people and looking at a bunch of different data sources is that a lot of OTT spending is still nationally targeted, not locally targeted. But as you can see, as we go through our forecast series through 2025, we come to almost doubling the spend to 2.4 billion plus by 2025. So this is a sizable chunk of money that's being spent in local. It's a new category for us. We broke it out just recently. So the rate of change is pretty interesting. The fastest ad platform until OTT has been mobile, where the spending has increased dramatically year to year. Now OTT is actually in our forecast growing faster on a compound annual growth basis than mobile. Next slide. And I'll talk just about a few of the different verticals. We do 12 major verticals and then 95 specific verticals. So for example, one of our major 12 verticals is auto. And then we forecast out for the 3 tiers. In tier 3, which I'll talk about in a moment, we break that into new car dealers, but also old old car dealers. So just to give you a flavor of some of the kind of data we have, I thought it'd be interesting to share a couple of the highlights. Next slide. So first we'll look at legal services. That's one of our professional services subcategories. In 2021, we're seeing $4.8 billion being spent in this category. And we're saying 2% goes to TV OTT, which is just shy of $100 million spent by legal services companies. And so that $4.8 billion, that's in the legal category, all our media spending. We track 16 media and local spending, and across all 16 media, of which OTT is one, that's that $4.8 billion. By 2022, next year, we see that growing a bit to $4.9 billion, and OTT growing about 10% to $106 million by 2022. Next slide, please. And we have a lot more information behind what I'm sharing now, but of course I don't want to spend too much time on this since we have this awesome panel and a lively interviewer in Mitch Oscar to get to. So new car dealers in tier 3, a few $1 billion will be spent in 2021. Just under 2% goes to TV OTT, 53 million. We see that going up quite a bit, actually, relatively speaking, 2022 to $3.4 billion. And then 2%, a bit more, will go to TV OTT to almost $68 million. Next slide, please. And then this will be the last of my data slides, just to highlight this. But we do this, these numbers we do for each of the 210 local markets. We have a lot of drill down data available here. Hospitals, $4 billion will be spent across all 16 media we track. 1.3% goes to OTT. That sums to about $52 million across all those 210 TV markets. $4.4 billion going up about 10% in 1 year to next year. 1.6 more will go to TV OTT, which brings the total to almost $67 million. So with that, a quick introduction to BIA. I'll say a little bit more at the back end of our webinar today, and a flavor of the kind of data we have around OTT, the overall local spend estimate through 2025, and examples of a few of these verticals. And now, Mitch, I will turn it to you to explain the very simple, straightforward, and clear world of television and where OTT fits into it.
Thank you, Rick. So we provide at the head of all of our webinars just an update of the different sectors and the major players. I don't go over it, but the conversation that we'll have today, whether we're talking about reach extension or deduplication of viewing audiences, addressability, frequency capping, and other things that come up, actually each one of these verticals have to deal with this subject matter, so we think they'll relate. Now, if anybody wants a copy of this slide, please contact Rick, and then I'm sure if he wanted to talk about it, we'd be glad to talk about it. So at this point now, let's meet the panelists. Okay, so Kamal.
Thanks, Mitch. Hello, my name is Kamal Bukhari. I'm the General Manager of Data and Analytics at Dish Media. Just as a refresher, Dish Media is the ad sales division for both Dish Network inventory as well as Sling TV inventory. And our focus is primarily on addressable television.
Thank you. Jessica.
Thanks so much for having me here, Mitch, and good to be with everybody. I'm Jess Daigle. I'm the VP of Sales Intelligence at Tegna. And I think many of you know Tegna as a local media company, one of the largest in the country with 64 TV stations across 51 markets. We're also the parent company to Premion, which is the first to market an industry-leading CTV and OTT local ad platform. And I just would say what really makes us different is that we combine this sort of living room, high quality experience, whether it's streaming or linear, with targeting and best-in-class measurement. So I'm really excited to get into the details of that today.
Thank you, Jess. And now in black and white, Nelson.
You just took my joke. I was going to say I was the one in black and white.
Oh, Nelson's the one in black and white. Okay.
I'm the guy in black and white. Thanks, Mitch, and thanks to the BIA for hosting such a great panel. I'm really looking forward to having a great conversation. So, in my role at Gamut, I'm responsible for leading the sales efforts for the Northeast region. For those of you not familiar with us, Gamut is part of Cox Media Group, and our focus is working on brands and agencies that are advertising locally. So we're working with national, regional, and local brands and their agencies, any of which that are trying to reach local audiences and targeted local audiences. And we're helping them find these audiences and these hard to reach audiences and with targeted audiences within our premium network of ad supported publishers. Go ahead.
Nelson, so just a question. So you're part of Apollo, and Apollo then owns Cox TV Station Group and your OTT CTV platform Gamut. Is that true?
Exactly.
And how many stations might, if you know, or coverage might Cox have?
So Cox Media Group, I think, owns stations in about the 30s, something like 30 DMAs. I'm not quite sure, but for Gamut, we're reaching, all 210 DMAs.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Justin.
Hi, Mitch, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Justin Fromm. I am the head of research at LG Ads. It's nice to be on another one of these OTT panels with the BIA team and Mitch and some of the other folks here, albeit in a new role. So LG Ads is the sales arm for LG Inventory and their connected TVs. So I support a group of ad sales professionals who are out in the market kind of monetizing the inventory that we have on our own apps, on our televisions, and through partner apps.
So Justin, as a favor for the group, can you talk a little bit about the evolution? So Alfonso and then the 80%?
Sure, yep.
Okay,
yep,
good.
Yep, absolutely. So as Mitch is referring to, LG Ads is a new business in the marketplace. It is the kind of reinvention of a company many of folks on the call may be familiar with, Alfonso.tv. That was a data SaaS solution in the marketplace for many years, utilizing a best-in-class ACR automated content recognition tool to power data insights about linear and connected television. We've married that to the media inventory available through LG television and the data and, the media inventory available through LG televisions and other devices in LG television households to come to market as a new opportunity.
And thank you. And not only is LG Ads available in LG TV sets, but I think you have 7 or 8 other manufacturers that are part of your network. Is that also accurate?
That's right. So our ACR footprint and our media opportunities, while they focus around LG, they are supported by many other OEMs, some of the smaller in the marketplace, Hisense, Seiki, Sony, which make us kind of the biggest and broadest CTV opportunity from an OEM standpoint.
All right, thank you, Justin. So we all need someone on the panel who we can pick on because they're the advertising agency. Phil, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Phil Herring. I'm coming to you from USIM. We are a large independent agency, full service. One of our specialties actually is local markets and focusing on how those markets are different, how we address the audience there differently. I've only been here for about 8 months, but obviously CTV and OTT has been a hot topic and we have a fair amount of our spend there. So really interested in joining the panel and discussing that with you all today.
Thank you, Phil. Joe.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me back. That's always a good sign. I am the president of TV Squared, for those of you that don't know me. And we are the world's largest measurement and attribution platform. We leverage a ton of everybody that's listening and everybody on this panel's data. We measure local, we measure all OTT CTV. We're integrated across more than 70 publishers now. We are live in 75 countries. We also bring in MVPD data sets, ACR data sets, location data, lots of other data sets. The idea being this, when you can prove that television works, people spend more on it. This is TV's watershed time. I think you all know that there's a lot going on in our industry right now, and having a single platform that measures television globally, but also measures it full cross-platform, so we can get into reach and frequency and reach extension, attribution and outcomes, and then tying back to an audience and being able to optimize against that is really table stakes these days for any discussion with any marketer. So I'm looking forward to getting into this a little bit with everyone on the panel, and hoping that those listening learn something from today. It is not as hard as everybody makes out.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Joe. And Adam.
Thank you, Mitch. And thank you guys for having me today. My name is Adam Noble. I am the Director of Product Marketing at Index Exchange. But my focus at Index is really on the OTT and CTV business. For those of you unfamiliar, Index is one of the world's largest SSPs. We've now evolved into an omni-channel SSP, which is essentially a buzzword for we transact on pretty much every format you can think of. And my role at Index is to help the company go to market with their new OTT CTV business, as well as drive the company's internal understanding and product roadmap.
Thank you, Adam. So basically what we've changed our format a little bit, that we invite someone to present for 5 minutes an overview of the industry. Justin done it in April when we did our last OTT platform, and he was advertising perspectives and gave the survey results and what advertisers were thinking and leading, or media professionals. And we've asked Adam, so if you go to the next page, to talk about challenges in this realm. So Adam, please take it away.
Awesome, thank you, Mitch. So Joe just mentioned how OTT is not as hard as we think it is and as many perceive. Mitch brought me on to basically talk about all the hard things facing OTT, and there are many, but I am looking forward to the dialogue that follows. So if you want to go to the next slide, this is the kind of obligatory disruption is complicated. There's a lot going on in OTT slide. But the point here is that any new method of reaching viewers is going to create new opportunities, right? So TV media owners can now go direct to consumer. There's so much happening, but all that happening is creating complexity for the advertising industry. And with the many devices, software, and services driving all of this, that also means splintering capabilities and buying channels. Set-top boxes are being replaced with streaming devices like Roku sticks and smart TVs. New entrants like Pluto TV and Tubi have given consumers the option to watch TV for free, right? What does that mean for a $200 billion TV business composed of revenue from advertising, subscriptions, retrans fees, right? The OTT revolution impacts all of this. So this level of confusion is really driven in large part by fragmentation. So if you want to go to the next slide, when it comes to OTT, most now understand the acronyms, right? Like I think we've gotten fairly good at understanding what virtual MVPDs are, and SVOD and AVOD. And the takeaway is you have a certain infrastructure play with the OEMs, the smart TV ecosystems. You have your access points with SVOD, AVOD, fast apps. But the primary takeaway here is all of these things also offer access to content, to data, to inventory, to ad inventory, right? So who owns what? Who has the right to sell what inventory? Is the inventory I purchase from Pluto the same as the inventory I buy from NBC? How do I coordinate across all of these various platforms? That whose audience data do I use? Ultimately, you can watch YouTube clips as well on a CTV. You can browse the internet using a CTV platform, but that's not TV as many of us traditionally understand it. So is it OTT, right? These are the things underlying the acronyms that we need to sort through as an industry. So if you want to go to the next slide, a big driver of confusion here, and there's a little animation there for you to enjoy, belabored here. So the next slide here, a big driver of confusion is the lack of standards for OTT in the programmatic ecosystem. Headline here is programmatic is somewhat poorly equipped for separation and frequency controls. How many times have we been watching, or have you watched a streaming TV show and seen the same ad back to back to back, right? That's because exchanges were built for transacting on single impressions, not multiple impressions within a pod. So that makes adhering to TV rules somewhat challenging, right? And then there's even more technical stuff like timeout rules. If we're used to timing out an ad call, for say an hour time frame, well, movies can be 3 hours long and load ads prior to the movie even starting, right? So there's a whole lot to unpack just with how programmatic works. But much of this is challenged by just the open market lacking OTT standards altogether. You know, there is no OTT object in a bid request that makes identifying inventory easy. So instead, what do we fall back on? We fall back on deals as a proxy for that, right? The content object in a bid request does have great information about the content name, the genre, the titles, but the number of sales channel conflicts within the space usually mean that's withheld. In addition to sales channel conflicts, a lot of publishers just aren't ready yet to target specific shows within their streaming apps. And they certainly aren't interested in distribution partners being able to sell or target inventory under them or within their most valuable assets. So there's a lot of uncertainty for advertisers within that paradigm around what am I targeting? Where do my ads run? And if that's not, pain enough, we have addressability concerns, right? OTT campaigns are on cookie-less devices, generally speaking, with CTV, often viewed by a household rather than an individual person. And most targeting is done by IP address and household file, which aren't perfect, right? So most OTT campaigns at the end of the day end up having to choose between two things. Do I want a direct deal with well-known TV publishers for this assurance of context? Or do I want to make a broader buy across the ecosystem that includes AVOD and FAST apps because I need audience, right? These are some of the challenges facing us today. So if you want to go to the next slide. So how do we define OTT, right? We were just talking about this, and Steve did a great intro on how we define it here at BIA, right? But given the lack of standards, you would think that definitions would be somewhat universal at this point. Well, at Index, we ask our advertisers, agencies, and buy-side platforms and partners all the time, what are the words you use when you define this inventory? Well, first things first, most say connected TV, right? But connected TV is just a device. It can be, OTT can be viewed on any screen. So, and plus a device doesn't define the content qualities, right? So if you go to the next slide, another word commonly used is full episode player. It's a very common term in validating inventory. The problem is a full episode player isn't really a proper thing at all. It's usually defined by a screen resolution or, some type of immersive video experience with mid-roll ads. That makes good sense for OTT, but here's the problem with full episode players, right? You can get a full episode of a TV show, but you can also run, 30-second cat videos in a full episode player. So it's not in and of itself enough. So what's next? Well, long form seems to be the natural extension to full episode. So what about long form full episode player inventory on a CTV? Well, that bottom right image you see is a channel that's on the streaming ecosystem of a point of view angle wandering a cornfield on loop 24 hours a day, and they serve ads. So if you think about that experience, brand safety, brand quality, contextual quality is a challenge. So if you go to the next slide, trusted platforms are often the next default. So I'm going to go to Roku, I'm going to go to Tubi, I'm going to go to Amazon Fire, right? The problem is there's so many long tail apps and content in that ecosystem. So even using these, think of what we've just gone through, right? CTV device, long form content in a full episode player, served onto Roku, and maybe a familiar category like news, right? Well, the examples I have here are Mike Lindell explaining election fraud on a fringe political channel. You have the digital version of WebMD that specializes in removing blemishes, for lack of a kinder way to put it. I think I did all right there. And then familiar categories like news, where you have, you see the logos there. Well, Miami TV is also indexed as news, but it happens to be naked news. So long story short here is the definitions are challenging because while OTT is an excellent new distribution channel for television, the content and the quality of TV inventory as we know it can be challenged. And if you go to the next slide, and this is my last slide, and then I'll stop talking for a moment here. All of that's hard enough, but then you also have the reality that connected television suffers from a fraud problem. There's ways to work around fraud. Deals, again, have become a proxy for that as well. But there are estimates now that anywhere between 19 and 24% of inventory served to a CTV run the risk of being fraudulent impressions. The reason for that is SSAI ad serving. We love SSAI as TV publishers because it gives a broadcast-like viewing experience. No buffering, seamless movement between content and commercial, right? All of that is great, except SSAI ad calls are made from a server, not the client or the device, which means the normal flags that we would have for fraud, like data center traffic, or even just how we validate an impression being served, are challenged because those calls happen in the server rather than from the client. So you end up with, as you can see, many headlines here where you have situations where cheap mobile supply is spoofed as connected TV. You have folks that hijack IP addresses and spoof devices off of those to do impression bursts, right? So there's many challenges to OTT, much of which happens to do with really just the ecosystem itself and the framework within which OTT is transacted, needing to mature and be ready for television. So with that said, I hope those challenges were a helpful context setter for the larger discussion here.
Thank you very much, Adam. So now we're going to go to the panel discussion. Also, Adam referred to someone named Steve in the beginning. He did mean Rick Ducey, though Rick does do community theater and is known as Steve. So Jess.
I started strong, Mitch. I started strong. We're doing good.
You did. Jess, so we read in the trades, biggest topics on OTT, CTV, or reach extension attribution outside of fraud and the explosive revenue growth. As a dominant TV station group aggregation platform in this realm, what do you think and why?
Thanks so much. Yeah, absolutely. And I think fundamentally here, OTT was born to sort of fulfill this promise of bringing together what I like to think of as sort of digital superpowers of measurement and targeting with the magic of sight, sound, and motion. And that's what sort of the promise is that we've been fulfilling on. And that's why attribution, measurability, reach extension, all of those topics you mentioned at the top are so critical. We also find, and I think this might be true more in the local space than on the national front, but clients demand a whole lot more from us these days, and especially in the last 18 months, than delivery. So your buy posted on TV or you ran, at 100% flighting. They want to know the outcomes. They want to know performance. They want to know how many couches we sold, how many hamburgers we sold, how many cars we sold for them. And so I think those two things combined has sort of set the stage for this perfect storm of CTV being expected and really being a focal point of attribution, cross-stream, cross-platform measurement. And it's something that we've been focusing on for the last 4 years. We, like Joe mentioned earlier, feel like website attribution, location attribution, reach extension measurement, that's sort of a baseline for television, for OTT, for cross-platform campaigns. Where we all need to get to and where we've been focused on is pushing beyond those outcomes really into sales and to understand, how many cars do we actually sell? And so we're doing that with additional partnerships with companies like Polk Automotive. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good reason that this is a hot topic today.
Good. Nelson, do you agree with what Jessica has said or disagree?
Yeah, no, I agree a lot with what Jessica said as far as, brands demanding more of us, and especially in local, where it's even harder to measure and to find those attributes. And so that, that challenge is even more challenging. And so we're working with clients all the time to, work on strategies around reach extension, right? Whether that is, through a topic I know we're going to discuss later with frequency capping or recency capping to make sure that they're really are reaching net new audiences. Things like suppressing maybe heavier linear viewers to make sure that they are really getting, those unique eyeballs that they're looking for to help, replace the erosion that they're seeing in linear with OTT audiences. Or maybe in working with clients, from an insights perspective to think about new audiences that they can go after to help to help find net new audiences and net new customers by looking at different segments that maybe they're not using in television or maybe they're using differently through OTT. So I think Adam did a great job of kind of articulating a lot of the issues and problems in this space. and there's a lot of them, but I think also it's not as difficult as some people make it out to be as well.
Thank you, Nelson. So Justin, in World War II, the three dominant allies were the US, England, and Russia. As one of the three dominant OEMs, the Treyarch of sorts, along with Samsung Ads and Vizio Ads, what does LG Ads think about reach extension being a critical topic?
Wow. Troika. Okay. That is absolutely a wonderful way to think of it. You could also think of it as kind of harkening back to kind of the start of television when there were three broadcast networks. I'm going to start by saying that I think something that underlies all of this is that TV remains one of the most, if not the most important medium for many advertisers, certainly national advertisers and a lot of local advertisers as well, because it is, has the trifecta, or sticking with the three magic number here of sight, sound, and motion. And it also enables tremendous reach in a short period of time. But what some other folks have talked about is the fact that linear viewing has changed drastically over the last decade or so. I think it's amazing to think about the fact that we only have streaming, Netflix streaming and Hulu since 2007, right?
Well,
so the world has really turned upside down.
Hold on, but from an OEM perspective is really where I'd like you to address. Later on, we'll get into more of the linear and the reach, but from an OEM, since Jessica already talked about the TV station group, from an OEM perspective, is this important, reach extension?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's why I kind of gave you that preamble, is the fact that you have a drastic change in linear television viewing, and not as many people are available to advertisers on linear TV in the same amount of time as they used to be. So reach extension is certainly something that we're thinking about. I think that the OEMs, LG Ads certainly would say we're well positioned to do, because we create a device graph within a given household where our television exists using the IP address and other data. We, obviously, there were conversations about the challenges of different types of data, but you can kind of manage the instability of some of those data points to create a solid device graph. And then you can find those potential viewers, the folks you might be missing. And also, as Nelson was mentioning, kind of suppressing those you've already reached, both in their TV viewing, whether that's linear or elsewhere, and on other devices, so on a cross screen, on those, whether it's browser based on the laptop, on their phone or on a tablet, and all of that can be reach extension.
And is that, but to the category of OEMs, so yourself, Samsung, Vizio might have these same capabilities to varying degrees, is all I want the people who are listening to know, that that's what would be wonderful about working with OEMs. Do we?
Yes.
Would you agree with that? Okay.
Well, absolutely. Right. Yes, because of course, like as I noted, right, like if you have the end, if you own the glass in the household, then yes, you can kind of manage through all of those things through an OEM.
Perfect. Joe, your company recently did a survey about CTV engagement. What were some of the things that you were indicated by the respondents?
Yeah, hit me up if anyone wants the report. The main reason, Mitch, that for advertising on streaming was incremental reach. So of the people that we surveyed, 70% cited the ability to extend reach and engage with audiences beyond linear was why they were doing this. Also, though, it's interesting, 17% said understanding deduplicated and incremental reach across streaming platforms is their biggest barrier from fully leaning into streaming. So I think, we have to be cognizant of the walled gardens, the OEMs. Most of the time they can only measure their data and their piece. And more, marketers have to be able to measure everything. So full cross-screen, cross-platform. I think one other quick thing, because it's relevant, last year in Q1, we were measuring about 20 different CTV platforms for our advertisers. And by Q4, that was over 130 different pubs and platforms globally, which really speaks to what Adam was saying and what Jess was saying about, you know, it's new, but it's what everybody's leaning into right now. And it's the ease of measurement and optimization capability, plus the content that makes it so attractive.
All right, thank you. Kamal. So we've been talking about CTV platforms as we know them, and we know addressability is very important to the television video ecosystem. So you've recently a couple of years as an MVPD with an addressable platform come out with Reach Booster, whether you can use it with Sling or just in Dish. Ampersand, a competitor, has its national TV extensions. Verizon has its new CTV or media platform. Why do you think Reach extension capability is important?
Thanks, Mitch. It's an important part of the advertiser's strategy to continue to maximize their reach for their ad. And what we have done at Dish is utilize our addressable technology, our viewership data, to be able to let the advertiser know what their reach was on the Dish platform for that linear ad, and then be able to target one-to-one to those households that either were missed, that were not exposed to that ad, or they were underexposed, and create a plan to maximize their reach. And right. It's an interesting way of, you know, increasing reach by using the addressable technology.
All right. And Phil, being our agency guy, what do you make of all this? Is Reach extension an important value proposition for platforms to offer?
Hi, Mitch. Yes, absolutely. And as Jessica noted, we're being held more and more accountable to the media we purchase on behalf of our clients. So it's hard for me to make one size fits all statement when it comes to Reach extension. It's really dependent on campaign. I would say for the majority of campaigns we run here at USIM, Reach extension is important, particularly in the CTV space and OTT space. We want to make sure that whoever we expose our ads to via CTV and OTT, we also have the opportunity to reach them on other devices, particularly if we're trying to drive website visits, leads, or conversions, and also in order to tie back to really see how our CTV dollars are working. I do think that as an industry, you know, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but we need to move beyond just exposure and completion rate. We need to see how our media is driving performance, whether that be conversions, signups, or anything of the sort in the lower funnel.
All right, thank you. So, Joe, last time you were on the panel, you had done a deal with Sinclair, and now you've recently done a deal with Tegna. Is that true, Jess?
That is true.
Okay.
Check me out.
Can both of you share something about the relationship that we wouldn't have seen in the trades that can give us a little more visceral understanding of how you might work together?
Who wants to go first, Jess?
You can go ahead, Joe. You can go first.
All right. So I think what's really stand out about the Tegna partnership, which won't have been obvious in the trades, is not just the speed at which we partnered, but also the implementation. I'm not going to say is already done, but our teams have come together with such force. And what gives me the most joy and gratitude in this partnership is that we stopped talking and we started taking action. So I think you people listening probably know.
Wait, hold on, Joe. But like what? Those are very descriptive big terms. I mean, if everyone you're working with, it takes them 3 months to get up and loaded and start to measure.
Mitch,
yes.
Come on. Have you worked with an MVPD? Make that 3 years, love, not
Okay.
3 months.
So an MVP 3 years. What did Tegna, if you can share with us, take to do?
So we probably did the partnership in 3 weeks. And actually, what's stand out about it is the fact that it's close to 1,500 advertisers right off the bat. It's true cross-platform, which incorporates measurement, so reach and frequency, incremental reach, frequency caps, plus outcomes and attribution for data-driven linear, and of course, Premion, as Jess already talked about. This doesn't only include drive to web and sales and revenue and conversions and all of those attribution KPIs, but also includes location data for about 1,000 of those advertisers. So really, it is the first of its kind at this scale. Jess, anything I missed?
Yes. And Jess,
No, I was going to hit on, so I think the speed is right. We did the contract. 3 is the magic number of this webinar. We did the contract in literally 3 days, and we did the implementation in about 3 weeks. And yeah, I think that we've lifted and shifted and launched thousands of advertisers. Actually, following this, we get to launch it with the rest of the team, which is really exciting. And I think I think the scale is the number one, and number two, in working with TV Squared, just the sophistication, the ease of implementation in their platform is tremendous. I think the team is going to be delighted with the granularity and the amount of data that you can dig into, and it'll allow us to continue leading in the attribution space and proving the value of our media. So really exciting.
All right, let's go to Justin. Reach extension again, and something that you can do that you've explained to me is that you kind of have linear TV, as you mentioned, but you own the household through cross-screen activations. So can you please explain more of what that means to the people listening?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so because as I was saying before, right, viewing has evolved, and as Adam pointed out in those slides that he has with that did a tremendous job of demonstrating kind of all that's available from an OTT video standpoint, as well as the content that's available on OTT that many of us might not think of as linear television. We are able, as an OEM, because we are connected at the glass level, right? So at the television device itself, we have a connection into that household via their IP address. We can create a device graph, as I was saying, to identify all of the devices that connect to that to the wireless ISP, and then we can serve ads to any and all of those devices at any time, which means you can surround your audience when you work with an OEM CTV provider, right? You can own all across the entire funnel, all in one place, right? If television is generally top funnel awareness, as I was saying, and we all talk about, and if you want action, creating action, and you understand that mobile ads drive web visits or drive at point of purchase decisions, like we can drive all of that for you, and that can be reach extension, extending the reach of linear. It can also be adding reach where reach is not possible via linear television as well.
Thank you, Justin. Something gets mentioned, or Jess, you were throwing it out, and I want to ask the question to Nelson, is local versus national. Selling ads to whether the advertiser or agency, what's the difference? Or is there a difference? Nelson, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a tremendous difference. And, at Gamma, as I mentioned earlier, we're really focused on local. And so we do that in kind of 2 different ways, right? From a product perspective, it's really important for us to be able to scale in local markets. And so what we're doing there is we're really working very closely with personal relationships and one-to-one relationships with our publishing partners to be able to get priority access to this inventory, right? Because you can scale pretty easily in a national campaign with one partner, but in local, you're probably going to need, we get bucketed as an aggregator. I like to use the term unifier. I think it has a little bit of a better sound to it. But when we're unifying all of our publisher inventory at a local level, having that priority access is really, really what's key and crucial to being able to scale. But not only scale, but target audiences at scale. And then secondly, just understanding that there's a lot of nuance between markets, right? And so we've got a really great in-house research and insights team that spends a lot of time looking at local markets. And so we spend a lot of time, with our clients and agencies and sort of the pre-campaign planning, out looking at the different nuances between markets, because you really can't have a cookie cutter approach, right? If you're a brand, for instance, when looking at kind of propensity for streaming, a market like Salt Lake City, is going to be 36% more likely to be streaming, than the average market, where Miami might be 24% less likely than the average market. So you can't have the same strategy for both of those markets. So really understanding those market nuances.
But Nelson, that's individual markets. I have that, but the question, and maybe Jess, you want to run with a little bit. What's the difference between local and national?
Yeah, so that's just, that's
no,
just.
Not Nelson. No, not Nelson. We have to get Jess involved. We have to get everybody involved.
You got it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our advertiser base is different. I think our local advertisers hold us to a much higher standards from a performance measurement standpoint, as I mentioned before. And then I do think scale. I think Nelson was talking about the scale issue, and that is really critical. It's something we have over the walled gardens. And then what Adam teed up for us in the beginning of the obstacles with fraud, I mean, that's real. And so making sure, from an advertiser perspective, that you're working with a tag certified vendor, or sort of the good housekeeping seal of approval, that they have actually vetted the supply path, because Adam walked you through the complexity of the supply path, and it's really complicated and it results in a ton of fraud. And so when you're talking about local, making sure that the inventory, there's enough inventory there, that it's super high quality, you're working with a trusted partner. But I would say, I think one of the misnomers on the local national is that local advertisers are less sophisticated, for example, and that's absolutely not true. We find our local advertisers are tremendously sophisticated. They own their own data, they bring their own data to the table, and we execute really complex and robust campaigns for them. So that would be one thing I'd like to dispel, and the other thing to chime in on was the scale and then the quality of that scale.
All right, thank you. So let's move the conversation on to deduplication. And if I end up repeating myself, please let me know. So we have platforms, whether TV station groups, MVPDs, addressable TV platforms, streaming service exchanges, managing deduplication across all this inventory and inventory sources. It's not easy. Adam touches upon it, others do. What's to be done? Adam.
Yeah, so the biggest thing to be done is standardization, but also agreement that walled gardens, while they have a certain degree of benefit, obviously, for the one walling off their inventory, can actually hurt the larger ecosystem in a lot of different ways. Jess just even mentioned a couple of them, right? I mean, fraud, I'll talk about deduplication, but just to touch on that fraud element really quickly, even the certifications, I mean, and we are, right? So like here I am, I'm probably gonna get yelled at later for this, but even the certifications have not fully caught up to OTT and CTV, and that's a problem. And the reason they haven't caught up is because, again, of the way that the ads are served. The certification itself, or any kind of validation of inventory, isn't happening on the device. So as a result, you end up with this kind of gap between the technology being used and the legacy validation tools that we've had. The same applies when you're talking about things like deduplication within an ad pod. The programmatic ecosystem was designed for a single ad in a single placement, right? And OTT is ad pods with multiple ads. There have been technical advances for pods, right? But a lot of it is hacked in and manual, or you're relying on an ad server to ultimately make a decision, which hurts the yield and monetization opportunity from the publisher. So we can monetize an ad pod. We can do it in a couple different ways. But the way that the majority of inventory flows through these pipes is as a single ad slot within a pod without any additional context that it's within the same pod. So as a result, unless you have a few different things happening, like some additional creative identification macro that fires to let you know that, hey, these two creative pieces are the exact same, most bidding technologies and most programmatic technologies aren't well equipped for it. So what happens is you have these bid requests that come in, demand responds to those bid requests, whether they're through a deal ID from a direct relationship or some other mechanic like a private marketplace. Demand comes back, and what happens is now it's the ad server's job. So if the ad server isn't sitting there carefully parsing out duplication, you get back-to-back-to-back ads, right? So a lot of this has to do, again, with, is there a macro being sent in bid requests that say, hey, pod 1, position 1, or pod 1, position 2? Because we also know the value of an ad, the position in the pod does matter. So the programmatic ecosystem has to catch up a little. You asked a question about what can be done. Standardization, agreement in what bid macros are going to be the baseline, is a starting point in my view.
Okay, Joe. So you're working across many platforms, sectors, whether it's CTV companies, cable system operators, broadcasters, streaming services. You want to chime in and say something here, or you don't have to?
Yeah, no, I mean, Adam clearly understands the inventory debacle more than I do. And I come at this with a simple view, which is, how do we make this a trading platform and automate it as much as possible? With humans in the way, things get complicated. We all know that.
Okay.
I think I want to just give one or two shout outs, Mitch, because I think that, we've seen more and more people come to us and say, we want to optimize reach by deduplicating audiences across both channels and platforms. And we know that that's the future. Winn-Dixie campaign reached 79% of households that were incremental to linear, and Balsam Brands 78% for its Christmas and July campaign. This is like standard stuff for us. And as you say, the only thing we can't see right now is direct off the glass from Apple and YouTube. Everything else we can measure and we can attribute against.
Okay, we have to do a commercial announcement for a second. Justin, Phil had a question for you. Will you accept it? And Phil, are you ready to give Justin the question?
I am, and Justin, I just wanted to give a quick, go ahead.
I was going to say, I accept the invitation.
Okay,
perfect.
Go.
And Justin, just as a quick shout out, to your company, my wife was filmed a video in your studio for her company. It had the best things to say about it. So kudos to that space in New Jersey.
Awesome.
Mitch and I meet with a number of vendors, the OEMs, the aggregators, and the direct publishers. And when I think about the OEMs, I often wonder what are the circumstances where it's truly beneficial to buy directly as opposed to using a programmatic or aggregator type buying approach. And the best example I'll use is I don't have many instances where I'm only looking for LG and LG's extension of an audience. It seems like, and this is not a knock on LG specifically, but it seems like most OEMs, if not all, have their devices, they have their device graphs built out. And that's great, but I don't find many instances where I would only want to focus on that audience. So I wanted to pose that to you, not just for LG, but to maybe speak on behalf, if you can, the larger OEM industry when it comes to advertising opportunities.
Sure. So, I mean, I will caveat by saying I've only been in the OEM industry for 3 months. So you might find some argument in the industry about me being kind of the voice of it. But so I think if you think about it, again, if you use the, Mitch used the troika analogy, which is a little bit awkward because no one's fighting here at least. But I think if you bring it back to the idea of kind of like, the original 3 broadcast networks, when TV started, there were limited options in terms of what people could watch, what they could tune into. And so you had giant shares of the audience tuning into whatever was on ABC, NBC, or CBS that night. I think we're kind of at the other side of that coin now, where there's just, a ton of content that's available to watch. And to reach everyone, I mean, I'd be curious to the question back to you, kind of how do you reach everyone in an environment when you have to continue to buy lots of different streamers to find all the audience? If I was the OEM industry, I'd say, hey, look, we have coverage across, 75, 80% of the country. If you can add some of the smaller OEMs, you can get very close to 90%, I think. I'm, not quoting numbers here exactly, but I think obviously the intention is there. But if you can then work with 3 partners and cover off, the large majority of TV households in this country, I guess the question back would be, why wouldn't you choose that instead of trying to work with others? I think programmatic, we understand the challenges of, content that you find yourself in and fraud that were brought up earlier.
So I have to go to the last and final question because we're running out of time, and Rick will have to wind this up. So thank you, Phil. I hope that Justin answered the question, or you can continue the conversation offline. Kamal, frequency capping and addressable platforms. I mean, I know everyone's going to agree with frequency capping, the issues, and what do we do? What are you guys doing to make sure that we don't just send a lot of commercials to the same households and the heavy viewers?
Yeah, so again, we have 2 separate platforms. We have the Dish platform, and then we have the Sling app, and we are able to do the frequency capping at the household level for Dish, because that's the satellite linear platform. But on Sling, through FreeWheel, we're able to frequency cap at the user level. And so it's a much better experience on OTT versus it would be on satellite.
Okay, and Jess, do you agree with that? Not what's better, but frequency capping as an issue and how you control that for your campaigns?
Yeah, I think frequency capping is a really hard issue. I don't think anybody we don't have the silver bullet, and I wouldn't want to say that we do. I think advantages that we have over a walled garden again would be just the scale, and so we don't run into an issue. So the scale, and then the content partnerships. When you're higher up on the waterfall, you're less likely to be double spotting or triple spotting in a pod. You're less likely to be left with the remnant, the leftover. So I think those are the two items I would add.
So thank you, everybody. With 2 minutes left, we give it back to Rick.
Mitch and everybody, thank you so much for a great discussion. A lot of great information and insight. And again, thank you very much for being so generous and sharing your thoughts and some great data and some insights as to kind of where the market is and what needs to happen next. Very specifically, some things that we really need to be working on. So I do want to close, Mitch, yes, with a couple comments about BIA. For those of you who know us or are our clients, thank you, we love you. Generally, we organize our services into a few different categories, if you will. One is data. I mentioned before we have a local market forecast product, 95 different business verticals, 16 media, all 210 TV markets or media markets. We can do different geographies, and we go back. One of the questions was, how far back can we do for our forecasts, for example, with OTT? So yes, we can go back to 2019, and for special projects, we can go deeper than that. So data, we also have a strategy layer of service, advisory services that can be retainer-based, where we work with clients on an ongoing basis or project-based. And then we also have tactical services, competitive tools, competitive profile, analysis, war cards are very, tactical things that salespeople can see what's going on in the market with competitors and products specifically to OTT, but also across the other media platforms. Next slide, please. And then finally, with our ad forecast, we give a lot of deep metrics about those ad forecasts, break it out by platform, by brand, for example, broadcast TV group, or we talk about the digital publisher, whether it's Google or Pandora, for example. Lots of different metrics in individual markets. Next slide, please. And then special offer, we have to have a special offer, right? So I mentioned that we do these forecasts, and so you can see here we have an offer for people here today who would like to take a look at our OTT forecast for a market for less than $200. You get steak knives plus an OTT market forecast, and you can just go ahead and buy that online at BIA.com. and you'll get a sense of what that spend looks like across all those different verticals for our 2021 estimates, our current year estimates. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. I'm rducey@bia.com. And our last slide gives you lots of other different ways to get in touch with us. Our website, if you want to reach out directly to different email sources. We do have a newsletter. Hopefully you all know about that and subscribe to it, have checked it out. If you go to bia.com, you can get to our newsletter and our blog. We also have started a podcast series that's become quite popular.
And
Once
people
again,
can get a copy of the webinar today. Is that correct, Rick?
absolutely. So everybody who registered, those who are here with us today, and those who couldn't make it with us live today, we'll be sending out a link with information to how to get the on-demand webinar, the slide deck, and other kinds of follow-up information. So thank you again for being with us today. Thank you very much. Thank you, speakers. What a wonderful job you've done sharing your brains with us for a bit today. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day and rest of the summer. And Patrick, with that, I'm going to turn it back to you.